Hey guys, welcome to my channel. It is Christian here. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today we're going to be talking about all of my favorite products of 2017. I know this video is coming a little bit late, but dupe week was not planned, so all of my other videos kind of got pushed back a little bit because I did a week's worth of dupes here on my channel. If you are interested in that, I will leave the link down below and I will have the playlist running over top. It was basically a bunch of different dupe items that I purchased from Shop Hush. So some of y'all did ask me if I was still planning on doing a yearly favorites. The answer to that is abso-freaking-lutely. That is the video that I am filming for you guys today, my year in beauty for 2017. Now, if you are familiar with my channel, there is a good possibility that you are going to know half of, if not all of these products, because I'm a pretty basic biatch when it comes to my makeup. No matter how much makeup I love, I'm a creature of habit, and when I find something I love it. I stick with it and I don't stray too often. Before I get into the video, I just want to say that if you are new to my channel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you do not mind, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Subscribing to my channel just ensures that you do not miss any future upcoming videos. And if you are not new to my channel, welcome back, you guys. Thank you for continuing to join and support. And yeah, if you're interested in all of the different things that I did love in 2017, then just keep on watching. I'm kind of just going to try to keep it in categories. It's not going to be in any particular order. I'm going to attempt to do it in the way that I would put my makeup on, but we're just going to see what happens. So first we're going to start with primer, and I have quite a few. Because I have more dry combination skin, I have my primers broken down into more hydrating, my favorite hydrating, and then my favorite more pore filling primers. So my most used, most loved, most talked about, raved about primer on my channel this year, I want to say, was probably the Tarte Clean Slate Primer. I actually need to repurchase this because I was pretty much done, and then it kind of dried out on me before I could get to the last little bit. When my skin dries out a lot, I unfortunately cannot use this primer. I can pretty much get away with wearing this primer from the months of like March to, I would say, probably around October. November, December, and January, this primer could be a little bit too drying on my skin because that's when my skin is at its absolute dry, flakiest. But this fills in your pores like no other. You need the absolute smallest amount, and you want to press this primer into your skin. You do not want to rub, and you do not want to apply a lot. I have said many times on my channel that this is my favorite primer, but it does require a little bit of a learning curve because if you apply too much, it will ball up. If you put too much, it'll just it won't sink in the way you want it to. You want to really just nicely press it, and I only put pore filling primers right here. I do not put pore filling primers anywhere else on my face because the rest of my face cannot handle it. It's too drying. But this is definitely one of my favorite products of 2017. Now, I honestly did not watch my favorite products of 2016, so I have no idea how many of these are going to be repeating or not. But if I had to guess, this product probably was in my 2016 favorites. I will leave a star down below of all of my products that are 2-year repeats. The Smashbox Primer Water. If you watch my haul videos, especially my Ulta hauls, you will see this product so many times in my Ulta haul videos, especially when they do 21 days of beauty. I will stock up on these. I will buy 3, 4, 5, 6. I will buy a ton of them. I love it. When this product first came out, I pretty much was like, yeah, that is nothing more than glorified water. I don't know what it is about this product, but I freaking love it. I feel like, especially when my skin is a little bit drier, but I use it every single day, even when my skin is a little bit more oily in the summer. It's a first step for me. Sometimes I'll spray it throughout the day. I keep a little mini of this in my purse, so when my skin is feeling dry and tight, I just spray this all over my face. So you basically can use this as an actual primer or as a refresher. I would not use this solely by itself. I don't think it holds enough power per se to be like a standalone product, but in conjunction with one of your other favorite products, because it does have a little bit of glycerin in there as well, so it will help your makeup last a little bit longer. It will make your skin feel a little bit more fresh as a first step. And like I mentioned, I do keep it in my purse, and I will spray this crap on my face all day. The other day, my face was so dry while I was at work, I went and I sprayed this all over my face, and you could tell my coworkers were looking at me because my face was like wet. They were like, what is this girl doing? But it's good. I repurchased it. I've talked about it pretty much since I started my channel. And this is one of those products that I usually have in bulk. I usually have 1 open and 2 or 3 on backup at any given time because I never want to be out of this product. Now we're going to do more of an honorable mention because I have not talked about this primer very much on my channel recently. In the earlier months of 2017, and I want to say maybe later months of 2016, I was obsessed with this primer. I went through an entire bottle and I even repurchased another, but there have been some other primers along the way that I just like that I have actually fallen in love with a little bit more. So I haven't been reaching for this one a ton lately, but I definitely do think it deserves an honorable mention because I do think it does, as far as hydrating primers go, I do think it's really good, and it does an excellent job of hydrating your skin and making your skin feel a little bit plumper and a little bit nicer. I did not tell you what the product was. So this is the Laura Geller Spackle Hydrating Moisturizing Under Makeup Primer, and it is what it says. I use this more as a moisturizer. Any primers that say like moisturizing or have moisturizing properties in them, I don't really necessarily use them for longevity or to make my makeup last longer. I use it as an extra boost of hydration, as a little bit of an extra plumping. If my fine lines feel a little bit more dominant, if my smile lines are looking a little bit more dry, I will go in super heavy with hydrating primers, moisturizers before I go in with my pore filling primer. So I decided to go ahead and give this an honorable mention. I should not have this many primers. The next primer that I want to mention is the one that kind of took the place of this guy. This is the First Aid Beauty Coconut Skin Smoothie Priming Moisturizer. And the thing I love about First Aid Beauty is they're awesome for sensitive skin. There's nothing from the First Aid Beauty line except for the stuff that comes in the, I think it's red, like the red labeling, because I think that's geared more towards oily skin. I typically most of the time can put First Aid Beauty products on my skin without fear of breaking out, without fear of, you know, it causing some type of reaction to my skin. So when I saw this, I absolutely had to purchase it. Again, I use this kind of the same way that I would use the Laura Geller primer, mostly for hydrating purposes. I don't know that it makes my makeup last longer, but I guess technically hydrating primers do make my makeup last longer, especially when my skin is a little bit more dry, because if my skin is too dry and I don't have that, if I don't have that necessary first step of hydration, then my makeup is just gonna flake off throughout the day. And that's kind of what I've been struggling with the last week or two, because I mean, 27 degrees in Houston, Texas, but why? Why? Like, it has snowed, it has gotten below freezing here. My skin just doesn't know what to do with itself. So I'm almost done. I'm almost done with this particular bottle, and I have a second bottle ready to go. So if you have dry skin and if you're looking for a primer slash moisturizer, but something that leans a little bit more on the moisturizing property, this Hello Fabulous Coconut Smoothing Primer is excellent. Another primer. So the next primer that I actually didn't like when I first got it, but I actually love it now. I have been using this in place of my Tarte Clean Slate Primer, and I haven't really been missing my Tarte Clean Slate Primer because I've actually really been enjoying this. I like this one a little bit more because, well, not more, I don't like it more, but I like it for my dry skin a little bit more because it fills in my pores, but it's not as thick and it's a little bit more on the liquidy side. So it doesn't aggravate any dry patches that I have on my skin. It sinks really nicely into the skin, and it really does a great job filling in my pores. The thing that I have issues with some other pore filling primers, especially something like the Benefit Professional, which I used to really like, but I don't really use the Benefit Professional very much anymore. I'm gonna give it another go because I think I have an unopened tube, but I'm gonna play with it a little more and try again. But the thing that I didn't like about the Benefit Professional is it would make my skin oily, which is really weird. But I noticed, because again, I only center pore filling primers here, I would notice that my skin would get super oily, like the Benefit Professional wasn't kind of sinking into the skin properly. I don't have this issue at all, and I didn't tell y'all what this was. This is the Dior Pore Minimizer Skin Refining Matte Primer. And it does mattify the skin, but it doesn't mattify the skin in a way that sucks the life out of your skin, that makes it over drying or makes it tight. And you can see I'm pretty much down to right here, so I'm almost completely done with this tube. I would definitely repurchase this, but when I first tried it, y'all, I did not like it that much. I was kind of like, this is overpriced, it's not that great. I have pore filling primers I like more. But as the months went on, and especially towards the end of the year, I found myself reaching for this a lot more. My most used and my favorite products I keep, like I've mentioned, I usually keep right here in front, and the products I don't use as much, I leave back here. And I have like my Milk Makeup Blur Stick, I had my Clean Slate Primer, and I had a couple of other pore filling primers in there as well. And this is the one I naturally was just gravitating towards, so I had to put this in the video. And then I'm going to do an honorable mention, and then we are done with primers. I know, how can one person have this many primers? But if you are on my channel a lot, you know primers, foundations, and eyeshadow palettes are my most purchased products. So my next favorite product this is more of an honorable mention because, again, I liked it when I first got it, and I reached for it a ton when I first got it. But it was one that kind of started to sit on the shelf a little bit more because I was gravitating towards other primers. But I do think it's great. I think the quality is awesome. And I think that this is a great pore filling primer if if you don't like those super thick silicone based primers. Now what I like about this pore filling primer as opposed to some of the other ones, again, it doesn't have that heavy silicone, more dimethicone type feel. It feels like a nice liquid on the skin. And what I like about this, whereas pore filling primers, like I mentioned 18 times already, I can only put right here. This particular primer, I can put more in my full T-zone. I can kind of press it into my fine lines. I can put it on my chin and right here in my smile lines, and it doesn't aggravate any of my dry patches. So that is always key for me when it comes to anything that says pore filling. But this was a good one, and it is the most affordable one that I am mentioning today. This one is under 20 bucks. It's sold at Sephora. And I mentioned this several times on my channel, and it is definitely worth the look. So this is an honorable mention. And we are done with primers. I had about 5 foundations to talk about today, and then I said it would all be lies. So there's only one foundation that really rocked my socks in 2017. And I do Foundation Friday. I have already filmed Foundation Friday. So Foundation Friday for 2018 is back in business. I'm kind of nervous about it though, because the way my skin has been acting, but I'm just ready. I love testing out foundations for you guys. I finished up about 4 bottles of foundation while I wasn't doing Foundation Friday. So I feel a little bit more comfortable starting it again and testing out new foundations again without feeling like I'm wasting a ton of money, because I did go through so many products. I loved the Wet n Wild foundation. It smelled like paint. I wasn't a big fan of the smell and the scent, but it was good. I ended up really enjoying the YSL foundation as well. The Giorgio Armani Power Fabric was another one that I quite enjoyed this year. I can't remember the name of it, but it was another drugstore foundation. The Vitalist, I believe it is, by CoverGirl. That one was great, but none of them held a candle to my baby. The Laura Mercier Flawless Fusion Ultra Long Wear Foundation. The only reason I'm not wearing this foundation today is because I had repurchased it, because this bottle's empty. I had repurchased it, but I wanted to try a different shade, and the shade that I purchased was way too dark, so I need to exchange it. Today I'm wearing the Power Fabric, which is one of the best color matches and foundations I've ever tried, so I enjoyed that one for filming because it matches me the best. But this foundation, I will link my Foundation Friday down below. Out of any product that I talked about, raved about, just went in on this year, it was this foundation. And I was so happy because I did see some of you guys tell me that you picked it up because of me and you loved it. I was all the way here for this. I got talked about it all the time. I'm gonna start, because I was really bad about it last year, but so far, and hopefully I keep up with it, I write down what I wear every single day, and I'm gonna start listing my makeup products, because sometimes I'll film a video on a Monday and I won't post it till Friday, and in the meantime I've completely forgotten what makeup I had on, so sometimes I really can't answer you guys' questions because I don't remember. But I'm gonna start writing it down so that way you guys can actually see the makeup that I love so more in my description box. You can see how often I'm actually wearing it. And pretty much until I ran out of this foundation, this was exclusively the only foundation I wore. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I've talked about it in 27 videos probably, but I will link the foundation, the correlating Foundation Friday with this, and you will see how flawless, how long wearing, how full coverage, and how absolutely beautiful it was, and how amazing it wore throughout the entire flippin' day. This was my favorite product of 2017. This hands down was my favorite product of 2017. So we're not going to talk about it anymore. I'm going to leave it in 2017. I mean, I'm not going to leave it in 2017, but I'm not going to rave about it every 5 minutes anymore. You guys officially 100% know my love for this foundation. Next, shall I talk about powders? We can talk about powders. So there are only 2 pressed powders that I wore this year, and if I was reaching for a pressed powder, okay, that's not true. Towards the end of the year, I started using another pressed powder, but it was later in the year to where I don't really think it's fair to mention it in this video. I would say probably around October, I started using Diffuse Light Hourglass setting powder underneath my eyes and to kind of set my face, to again give me a little bit more of that healthy, nice glow. But if I was using a pressed powder, which I don't use very often, if I was using a pressed powder throughout the year, technically there is 3, but one of them came a little bit later in the year. The first 2, one's drugstore, one is high-end, and I'm pretty positive I talked about this powder in my 2016 favorites as well. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Powder, and this literally will make you look airbrush. I'm almost completely out of it. This, along with MAC Mineralized Skin Finishes, is the only powders I have ever ran out of as far as pressed powders are concerned, because I don't use them very often. It just makes you look airbrushed. It's light on the skin. It's so finely milled. It just looks really, really beautiful. The shade ranges are a little off because I don't usually wear mediums. I mean, sometimes I'm more of a light medium, but this is definitely not a medium skin toned powder. This is definitely more of a light, if you can see the color there. I don't know if Charlotte Tilbury has expanded the color range, but I want to know, when I first discovered the powder, there was only 4 shades. I don't know if that has changed, but I don't think so. But it's beautiful. I don't really hear as many people talk about it anymore as I used to, as I did in 2016, but that is definitely a powder that kind of came with me, and I feel like it's going to be one of those powders that I will continue to repurchase. Now, this next powder, I was so impressed by the Wet n Wild Photo Focus line. The foundation and this powder were probably my absolute favorite. This powder, I used to wear MAC Mineralized Skin Finishes all the time, and I actually purchased a new MAC Mineralized Skin Finish, and I haven't even opened it. I purchased it months ago, but it's because I've been reaching for this powder. This is an excellent under $5 drugstore powder, and it pretty much, if you love the MAC Mineralized Skin Finish, I feel like you would love this. For drugstore powder, it is so smooth, it is so blendable, it is so... I'll set my under eyes with this. I really focus it on my smile lines. I tend to not set my entire face. I typically set in my T-zone a little bit in the summertime, and I always set where I'm going to apply powder. I don't set my forehead too often because my forehead is dry year round, but I will set the perimeters of my face. This powder is beautiful. It is definitely my favorite pressed powder. That's the wrong powder. That is the wrong powder. So my first favorite pressed powder, or loose powder of the year, is the Laura Mercier Perfect Setting Powder. Not the Laura Mercier. The Cover FX Perfect Setting Powder. I also love their illuminating powder as well in a light dusting, but this is something I can use all over my face. I don't bake very often because I have very dry under eyes. However, in my skincare video, I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to do a skincare favorites as well. I'm doing like an entire week's worth of favorites, no like least favorites, overhyped. Like, we're going in this week on favorite products. So this is something that if I do want to bake, if I do want to clean up my contour, if I do want to kind of set my face a little bit more, because sometimes I will kind of in my cheek area in the summer months, I will press powder right there and let it sit for a couple of minutes to kind of help me absorb my oils. This is an excellent powder for that. It is truly translucent, even though I do believe it comes in shades. It is translucent. It is one of my favorite products. One of my favorite powders. I've tried it in a really long time. It completely replaced the Laura Mercier setting powder for me, because even though I love the Laura Mercier setting powder, it's a little bit too drying for me. So I honestly don't know that I would repurchase the Laura Mercier setting powder anymore, because I have that bad boy now. And it's a great powder. This is more of an honorable mention. I picked this up as well this year, and as you can see, I'm almost completely out of it. This is the Too Faced Born This Way Ethereal Setting Powder. Anything that I just said about the Cover X powder kind of goes with this particular powder. It's beautiful, it's lightweight, it is great for baking, it's also translucent. I don't notice flashback with any one of those powders. I reach for them interchangeably. I kind of just leave my loose setting powders on my desk without the lids on them, and whichever one I grab for that is just the one that I grab for that day. If I had to pick, I would say the Cover FX loose setting powder is my favorite, but I don't like the fact that it is a little bit more pricey, because you do get less product in the Cover FX than you do in the Too Faced, the Laura Mercier, or most pressed powders. The Cover FX, they kind of jip you a little bit, if we're being honest. Let's go ahead and, oh, I forgot a powder. Oops. Let's back up really quick. This is my favorite powder exclusively for setting my under eyes. This is the Kat Von D Lock-It Petal Powder, and I'm sorry, I said setting my under eyes. No, I do not use this to set my under eyes, because if you actually try to set your under eyes with this product, I think it's a little bit too dark and it will leave a white cast. But just to lightly dust underneath, and I have repurchased, this is my second bottle, so I purchased 2 of these last year. So just to lightly dust underneath the eye to give you a little bit more brightness and to give you a little bit more luminosity underneath the skin. I love this. I used to exclusively purchase the Laura Mercier Secret Brightening, but I haven't repurchased that since I started purchasing this. Again, I do not actually bake or fully set my under eyes with this product. I literally will take the smallest amount, kind of set it underneath, and wipe it away. And I only use this underneath my eye. I do not use it anywhere else. And it does come in, I think, 3 or 4 different shades depending on your actual skin tone. This was another favorite loose powder of the year. I'm going through this. I'm trying to get through this so fast. I didn't realize I was going to spend 45 minutes talking about primers. Okay, so my favorite eyeshadow palettes. We have quite a few. So one of them isn't necessarily the eyeshadow palettes themselves. themselves, it is the eyeshadow formulation. My favorite, because I purchased one of the Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes, but I haven't gotten a chance to use it yet. So for 2017, my favorite formulation of eyeshadows, and I want to say this was probably in 2016 as well, I'm not 100% sure. My favorite formulation of eyeshadows was the Natasha Denona eyeshadows. These are pricey, they are expensive, but in my humble opinion, they are worth the money. Now, if this is my first video that you're ever watching, I did this week, or this past week during dupe week, talk about dupes for the Lila palette and the Sunset palette. The dupes, while good, they don't compare with the Natasha Denona palette. Natasha Denona just does an excellent job with her mattes. Her shimmers are getting better, her metallics, her duochromes. They are just freaking amazing, and I will continue to purchase Natasha Denona shadows. I do plan on, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I think I'm going to go ahead and purchase one of her 28 pan eyeshadow palettes, and then I'm going to do a battle of the Natasha Denona palettes, which one is best for you, which one you think you should purchase, or I might just do it based off of these three. I'm not sure, but I've always wanted one of her 28 pan eyeshadow palettes, and I think I'm going to go for it. But this just my favorite formulation of eyeshadows this year. Now, one that shocked me to my literal core, I didn't even think I was going to like this palette. I wasn't even going to purchase this palette because I was kind of on a Too Faced, I'm over you, y'all need to get y'all's lives together kind of situation. But I was in Sephora, I looked at it and I was like, okay. So I decided to go ahead and pick it up. And this is another palette that I've talked about quite a lot on my channel. This is another palette that anytime you've seen me wear, especially towards the later months, if I was wearing a more purpley eye in a video, and I feel like I was wearing a lot of purples in some of my later videos, if I was wearing a purpley eye, if I was wearing a peachy eye, every single time it was this palette. Every time. I was so impressed by this palette. I've reached for it a ton. I've used it. I love the transition shades. This is a palette, I always say that a palette is good and it was made for you if you will use every single shadow in this particular palette. There is not a shadow, there is not a shade in this palette that I have not touched, that I have not used, that I have not played with. Every single one. It has amazing transitions. It's on trend with being warm toned. It has beautiful purples in here, which I love because purples, my eyes are light brown with a hint of like honey hazel in them, and whenever I wear purples or super warm shadows, it almost makes my eyes look green. This palette I wore because I felt like it was the most flattering for my actual eye color. It made my eyes pop. They were surprisingly blendable. They were surprisingly creamy. I just love this palette. Too Faced has been making some of my favorite palettes. The chocolate bar palette was one of my favorite palettes. The original was one of my favorite palettes for a very long time. And this palette was one of my favorites of the year. So I'm on the fence about if I'm going to purchase the new one because I hate that Too Faced does that. Oh, we have a successful palette. Let's release 57 versions of the same palette. Just put a different name on it. But I was here for this palette in 2017. I was. Another palette that I'm going to talk about. This video is going to be 57 hours long. The next palette that also shooketh my life was the Nars Narcissist Wanted palette. This Nars makes some of my favorite face palettes ever. I will buy a Nars face palette over and over and over again. Their blush palettes, their highlighting palettes. I live, I breathe, I die for Nars face palettes. Their eyeshadow palettes have never been the best. Enter the Wanted palette. I love this palette. This is another one of those palettes that you heard me talk about multiple times on my channel. I don't do makeup on my channel very often in the sense of like actually applying it on my face because people are kind of mean. And anytime I do like makeup tutorials, I always get a lot of like nasty comments. So I typically don't post them. So I like to consider myself more of a review based channel. But anyways, this palette, oh bejesus, I loved it. This is kind of like Nars. I feel like this was Nars's introduction back into like the eyeshadow palette world, saying, you know what, we can do this too. We got it under control. Some of the stuff we were doing in the past was a little bit iffy and we're sorry, we apologize, but here you go. So this is one of those types of palettes that this particular palette, the Too Faced, basically every palette that I'm going to show you right now is one of those palettes that it is all you need. You never have to reach for anything else. You don't have to grab another shadow. And that's how I can always tell if I love an eyeshadow palette. If I will exclusively use this eyeshadow palette for weeks on end and just reach for it and reach for it and reach for it. And this was one of those palettes. This is another one of those situations where I love every single shade in here. It leans a little bit more warm, but you can take this eyeshadow palette cool if you want to. If you want to, I typically like it for the warmth. I love this rich brown. oh, this rich brown is stunning. I don't wear blacks very often, so a lot of people will take points away if there is not a black in an eyeshadow palette. I don't, because I'm not going to use it. So I much prefer when there is this super dark rich brown in an eyeshadow palette in place of a black, even though they have more of like a blackish gray right over here in this corner. I love the transition shades that come in here. I think the more metallics are beautiful. I think that Nars hit it out of the park with this. And was this limited edition? Is this still something you can purchase? I'm not 100% sure, but I freaking loved it. And I have been testing out the new palette, and I'm liking the new palette as well. I think I like this one more than the new palette, but I do like it. Sometimes I talk so fast, I'm not even convinced that I make sense. So another palette that I mentioned and I was thoroughly impressed by, and I went out and purchased it the day that it launched and put a video up that day. I typically don't do that. I typically will test product, unless I'm doing like a first impressions, I typically will test products out before I talk about them on my channel, which is why sometimes I end up never posting videos, because by the time I get around to testing it, it's like 3 months old at that point. So, but this was a palette that I was thoroughly impressed by. When I saw the price point on it, I was like, Sephora has lost their mind releasing a palette that expensive, but it's good. It has 28 eyeshadows. It is warm toned. They are a little bit more on the powdery side, I will say that. But no, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't worn every single eyeshadow in here. 28 eyeshadows in the palette is a ton. I haven't done it, but I've worn a lot of them. I have reached for this palette a lot. The only reason I reach for, I would say, the Nars palette and the Too Faced palette a little bit more is because this palette is heavy, it's big, it's bulky, and I don't leave it out on my everyday drawer anymore. I kind of put it away, so I don't, so it's not all up in my, it's not all up in everything. I prefer smaller palettes just because it's easy, because I have so much makeup. It's easier for me to store smaller palettes and kind of see them and grab for them. But I love it. It's still a palette that I'm going to reach for a ton. I bought this palette around the same time as I purchased the Naked Heat palette. And you guys, I've probably used the Naked Heat palette twice. It's in my bin of makeup I still need to try and play with, because I kind of felt like this did everything that the Naked Heat was ever going to do for me, plus more. It has every transition shade, every warm tone transition shade that you need. Obviously, if you don't love warm tone eyeshadows, I'm probably not the girl for you, because I tend to buy a lot of warm tone eyeshadows. I tend to love warm tone eyeshadow palettes. I am wanting to see more cool tone looks, because I wore a cool tone look in one of my more recent dupe videos and I loved it. So again, these eyeshadows are a little bit on the powdery side. They do kick up some dust, but they are blendable. They have a huge impact on the eye. It's an array of transition shades. One thing I love about a palette, when the shades make sense, like when you look at a palette and you're like, okay, yes, that is clearly supposed to be a transition shade. That is clearly supposed to be a deepening shade. That is clearly supposed to set my brow. That's my inner corner highlight. You can look at a palette and you can visually see the eye look that you're gonna do, especially for somebody who is not a makeup artist. A makeup artist can look at anything and make it beautiful, but when you're just more of a lover of makeup, kind of want something to, I don't want to say be easy, but you want to be able to look at it and understand it. That's why the Kat Von D shade, the Kat Von D Stay in Center palette for me, I couldn't use that palette by itself because I would look at it and get confused. I would reach for another all matte palette, or I would pull in different palettes to make that palette work for me. So whereas the palettes that I'm talking about today, they work. I was not going to mention this video. I was not going to mention this palette today because we were going to be talking about it in my YouTuber collaboration roundup for the year. That video had to get postponed. I had to test out the Kathleen Lights ColourPop eyeshadow palette. That is what I'm wearing on my eye today. So I'm going to test this palette out for a couple more days, and then hopefully that video will be up before the end of the week. I decided to go ahead and throw it in here anyway because it isn't a best in beauty if I don't talk about my favorite products of the year. The Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette was just good. Period. End of story. I feel like, and everybody has their preferences and everybody likes what they like and they don't what they don't. But I feel like if people who made negative videos about this palette or said they didn't like it, I think that the negative videos were being made more for views than like honest truth, because how often do you hear me talk about Morphe on my channel? Very rarely. I feel like one of the last times I talked about Morphe on my channel is when I purchased the Kathleen Lights Morphe palette last year. I purchased a bunch of Morphe Elite brushes, the original Elite brushes, when they went 50% off because they were cheap. But you don't hear me talk about Morphe very often. I was impressed by this palette. Everything about this palette, again, it's one of those palettes that you can take it cool, You can take it cooler if you want to, but it is a warm tone girls palette. I know that a lot of people say if you take out these bottom two rows, it's the 25-0 or the 35-0 or whatever O. I don't personally own that palette. I'm not huge into purchasing Morphe. Maybe now that it's sold at Ulta, I'll kind of test it out a little bit more, because I know that they've improved their formulation, their packaging, and things like that since they've been started being sold at Ulta. But I'm a little mad because this is the original packaging. You can see one of my eyeshadows fell out, busted, and broke, and it was a purple, and I wore the crap out of that purple. I loved it. The transition shades, the warmth, like these colors right here are beautiful. I'm gonna be honest, I typically stay in the 3 rows this way. I don't typically gravitate down this way too often, but I have used every single eyeshadow in this palette. Every single one since I've purchased it, because I've had it for quite a while. My battery died and my SD card ran out of space at the exact same time, so I have no idea what I was saying. But basically, the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette was a favorite of 2017. I do like the fact that they made it permanent. I do like the fact that they changed the packaging, because as you can see, mine is definitely really, really dirty, but it's also used. I think Jaclyn did a really excellent job on this palette, and I quite enjoyed it. Let's talk about bronzers. So we're gonna spend exactly 2 seconds talking about bronzers, because these are exclusively pretty much the only bronzers I've worn for a good majority of the year, and I've talked about both of them a lot. So the 2 bronzers that I love, live for, and adore. First one is the Bare Minerals Invisible Bronze in the shade Medium. The second is the Becca Sunlit Bronzer in Capri Coast. This has never happened with me in a bronzer, ever. I have struggled with bronzers a lot on my channel, them being too warm. I do have a lot of discoloration on my forehead as well, so bronzers were always a little bit more difficult for me to kind of figure out and to find ones that I absolutely love until these 2. So I love these 2 bronzers for pretty much the same reasons, but they are different bronzers. This one is, the Bare Mineral one is going to be a matte bronzer that is going to have a little bit of radiance. It's going to be soft. It's going to be a very light wash of color, but easily built up and easily blended into the skin. It always looks super natural. It always looks very healthy, and it always looks beautiful. I don't contour too often. I almost never contour. So I won't be mentioning contour today, but if I was going to mention a contour palette, it would probably be the Kat Von D contour palette. I probably contour 20 times a year at most. The other bronzer that I love, and you can see only bronzer I've ever hit pan on, the Becca Capri Coast. Now they are going to be similar in color. The Becca one might be the taddest bit more warm, but the Becca one also has a little bit of shimmer running through it, which is also going to make you look a little bit healthier, a little bit glowier. It's going to give you a super natural, lit from within, sun-kissed, beautiful glow. And that's all I'm going to say about these bronzers, because again, I've mentioned them time and time again. If I can think of any videos where I went into more detail talking about them, I will link them down below. Highlighter palettes. So Nars, I appreciated you this year, Nars. So I grabbed both of these because of the formulations of the eyeshadows. Again, I love Nars face palettes, but Nars shook my highlighting world with the Banc de Sable highlighting palette, which was limited edition. The fact that this was a limited edition product makes me very disappointed. I hope that Nars is planning on bringing this back or in individuals, I don't know how, in a permanent collection. Even though I do have these highlighters, and they'll probably last me a while, I would love to test out more colors in this particular formulation, because I love it. It looks wet on the skin. It is high shine. There's no metallic. There's no glitter. It's just beautiful. I have acne. That's been a struggle of mine for a really long time, but I feel like it doesn't over accentuate pores. It doesn't over accentuate the texture on the skin. I mostly center my brush in these 2 shades right here, but there are days where I will literally just take the brush, run it over all 3, and apply it to the skin. I almost did not purchase this. Look at it. It's just wet. It looks wet. I almost didn't purchase this in the store because I was like, you know what? I don't know that I love it. And then I'm so glad that I did, because I feel like that would have been like my biggest makeup regret of 2017 had I not picked this up. Now I'll go ahead and talk about this as well, because I do love the bronzers, the formulation of bronzers in here. Again, I love Nars face palettes, period. These are the same formulation of highlight that's in the Banc de Sable. This is the Bord de Plague, and I like the new formulation of Laguna. This also, I believe, has Casino. And the only repeat in this palette versus the one that we just talked about is this shade right here. And I do love the shades in here as well. There's 2 more for lighter skin tone, and there's 2 more that are a little bit more on the more golden, which will flatter more medium skin tones. I love the packaging. I love it. I love those highlighters. The other highlighting palette, which also blew my socks off, and the moment that I saw it, it was not a question of a shadow of a doubt that I was going to buy this. Again, Hourglass. I'm pretty confident that Hourglass is going to release these in individuals, because when they do things like this, they typically will eventually come out with individuals of those same products. This is the Hourglass Ambient Metallic Strobe Lighting Palette in Absolute Strobe Light, Pure Strobe Light, and Lucent Strobe Light. And how I love this. It is, if you think that the Nars ones are wet and high shine, this is even a step above that. But the great thing about Hourglass, they feel buttery smooth. The great thing about Hourglass is if you want it to be a little more natural, you definitely could. I mean, look at that shine. I can't say enough good things about these highlighters. This is going to be excellent for somebody who wants to highlight that might have a little bit more texture. This will help you out a little bit more in that situation, in that aspect. But they're beautiful. Of course, this is going to lean a little bit more towards light to light medium skin. I'm hoping they come out with a little bit more of a deeper range. Hourglass just makes beautiful powders. They are great for mature skin. They are great for dry skin. They're just good powders. I'm talking about their powders as a whole, not just these more metallic-y highlights. We're gonna keep it moving. I'm gonna mention one more of my all-time favorite everyday, more natural, just more light wash of highlight, more natural highlighter. This is my favorite natural highlighter. If I want a natural highlighter, if I'm going to work, if I just need something that I know is always gonna work for me, work for my skin tone, I reach for this guy. This is the Natasha Denona All Over Glow Face Body Shimmer and Powders. I love these. I've spoken about it quite a few times. You can definitely build it up to get you a little bit more of an intense highlight, but it's meant to be worn as more of a natural glow, and that is what I love it for. And we're gonna back it up to eyes real quick because I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about these. This is the second time I'm filming this video, and I forgot to mention these in the first video as well, and I also forgot to mention concealers in the first video. The Stila Glitter and Glows. I am wearing one on my eye today. What I like about these is it is glitter for dummies, and I'm a dummy when it comes to glitter. I have hooded eyes. I don't like to mess with glitter too often. These, they set in place almost instantly. Where you put them is where they'll stay. I do still have to use the glitter glue, but they don't transfer up to my upper crease as much. They have an amazing array of colors. So I have the ones from the original release. I haven't gone out and purchased any other ones since. I have the shade Diamond Dust, Smoky Storm, Smoldering Satin, Golden Goddess, Kitten Karma, and Molten Midnight. And I'm missing one. Oh, here we go. My favorites are Rose Gold Retro, which is the one that I'm wearing today. I also like the shade Diamond Dust if you want to wear it in the inner corner. And then I also really enjoy Kitten Karma. I think originally there were 8, but out of the original 7, I have these 3 are my favorite. And they just will take any look to the absolute next level. They don't flake off. Once they set, they're done. They're not going to flake. You're not going to end up with glitter on your cheeks at the end of the night, as long as you use the glitter glue. I always recommend glitter glue. They're beautiful. They're stunning. I want to say that these is probably, I haven't really had a chance to watch favorites videos yet, but I have a feeling that this is going to show up in a ton of people's favorites videos because they were good. I feel like this is one of those makeup products that had so much hype behind them, but that were genuinely, truly worth the hype. 2 concealers, and I might be the only person in 2017 who is not going to mention the Tarte Shape Tape as a favorite concealer. I love the Tarte Shape Tape, but then there would also be days where I would put it on and I absolutely hated the way my makeup looked. So because I was so back and forth with it, I can't honestly put it in a favorites video. I do think it's a beautiful concealer. I think that if you can make it work for you, I think that finding a color has been really difficult for me. I think that's my biggest issue with it, because I'll wear it, and because the Tarte Shape Tape, because it's so full coverage, if you don't have your exact right color, it will look too much, and I think that's been my biggest issue. I need to go out and try to find a color that is going to be a little bit better for me. So I will not be mentioning that as a favorite this year because of my back and forth with it throughout a good majority of the year. But the 2 favorite concealers that I will mention, and this has been a long-standing favorite along with my Nars Radiant Creamy Concealer. I use those a ton. But the 2 that I want to talk about for 2017 One of them actually surprised me because I'm not the hugest fan of this brand overall. A lot of their products are missed for me, but I enjoyed, this is also empty, and I did repurchase this as well. This is the Milk Makeup Flex Concealer, and I did purchase mine in the shade Light. This is super hydrating underneath the eyes. It's a pretty good color match. It blends easy. It blends effortlessly underneath the skin. It doesn't crease a ton underneath my eye as well. I really, really enjoyed this concealer, and I was shocked by how much I actually enjoyed it. This is a new bottle, so out of my 3 most used concealers this year, Radiant Creamy, the Milk Makeup, and this guy. And it got to the point where I was kind of like, when I first tried this, I didn't love it, but the more I used it, the more I was like, wow, my under eyes look so good. They look so flawless. I don't know if you guys can tell, I have a lot of discoloration. Like, you can always kind of see a little bit of a shadow right here on my face. I got hit in the face with a baseball in high school, and it has left almost like a permanent indentation in my face right here. So I always have like this dark shadow on my eyes. No matter what I do, I cannot cover it up. I cannot get rid of it. It is like always there. Anyways, that doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but I really enjoyed this concealer. Something about me that you guys didn't know, I guess. I really did enjoy this concealer a lot. I went through an entire tube. I like the doe foot applicator. It was the right amount of creaminess and a right amount of blendability for me, so thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it. Long-standing favorite of mine is the Urban Decay Naked Skin Concealer. I think that this was everybody's holy grail until Tarte came out with the Tarte Shape Tape. The Tarte Shape Tape is definitely more full coverage, and you do get a ton more product for about the same price. I actually think that you get less product in here, and this one is actually more expensive. This never fails me. It is a good, I had a difficult time finding the right undertone in this one as well. It's a little bit darker than most people would use as a concealer, but I use it because I have a lot of darkness underneath my eyes and in my inner corners. So I typically don't go for a concealer that's lighter to brighten. I kind of try to brighten with my powders. I go for more of a concealer that's going to have a little bit of a peachiness to it, so it can also kind of help me color correct as well. I have been through tube after tube after tube. I replaced this concealer at least 3 times in 2017. I replaced the Nars Radiant Creamy Concealer at least twice, and I currently have at least 3 different shades of the Nars Radiant Creamy Concealer in my collection as well. I have a lighter, my skin tone, and one that's a little bit darker. So those are my 3 favorite concealers of the year. I thoroughly enjoy them, and I think that those are concealers that no matter what comes out, what the next best thing is, I feel like those are going to be concealers that are always going to be tried and true, and those are always going to be concealers that are going to be great for dry under eyes. So I'm not really a blush person, so I don't have a lot to say about blushes, but I am quickly going to mention this guy. It's another Nars. Disgusting. That's the only bad thing about Nars packaging. When it's dirty, you can tell. The Nars Narcissus Unfiltered 2 palette. This was all the rage when it first came out. They came out with 2. They came out with a darker version that had great colors for deeper skin tones, and then they came out with this guy. I use this quite often. I typically use it because it has hot sand in here as a highlighter, but it also has, I believe this shade is the shade Undefeated, which I love. It's more of a peachy toned blush with a little bit of a sheen. I do like my blushes to be a little bit peachy, a little bit more nude. I definitely like to go with a more subtle nude blush. I don't like too much blush on my skin, but this is the blush palette. When I thought about blushes, this is what my mind instantly went to. So I don't want to just start talking about lip products because it's a favorite and I feel like I have to mention them. I definitely want to be honest. So no super favorites, but my most used lip products were Buxom lip glosses. And yeah, you guys, that is it. That's all of my favorite products of 2017. I'm going to be curious to go back and watch my favorite products of 2016 and see how many of these overlap and how many of them are genuinely new products. I really hope that you did enjoy this video. I really hope that you found it helpful. How many of these products did you know? How many of these products did you get right if you've been around on my channel for a while? Sound off in the comments below. Let me know some of your favorite products of 2017. Be curious to know what you guys were into. Thank you so much for an amazing 2017. Those of you who stuck by my side, who stayed subscribed to my channel, who stayed watching, who stayed supporting, I appreciate you greatly. And I really hope that 2018 turns out to be amazing and fantastic for all of us. And yeah, you guys, I will continue to see you in the new year. Bye, guys. I forgot about brows. Let's forget everything I just said. I forgot about brows. Let me really quickly say that my favorite brow products of the year were, this should come as no surprise, the Benefit Goof Proof has been a favorite brow product of mine for years. I will never not purchase this. I will never not use it. It does have color. It will tint up your brows a little bit. I love using the Precisely My Brow, which is my favorite brow pencil of the year. I will take this. I will fill in my brows. And anywhere where I notice that I still have a little bit more sparse area, I will take this guy, kind of comb through my brows, and this combination gives me the perfect brow. I'm trying to grow out my brows in 27. I started growing out my brows towards the end of the year because I completely want to reshape them. And they're a little messy and they're a little hard to work with right now, which I think that just goes along with trying to grow out your brows. But these two products make it a lot easier for me. I can't really use pomades. I love the Goof Proof as well, but now that I'm trying to grow out my brows, I think the Goof Proof is a little bit too hard for me to use. So these products are absolutely my staple products, and I wouldn't be surprised if I know I've talked about this last year. I know I did. I'm sure I talked about this as a favorite product of 2016 as well. And now we're done, you guys. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.